Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to today's podcast, NDISCO'S Village Meeting Podcast. This is episode 14, series 2. Today, we're going to start to talk about uh, an item that some people keep asking questions about um, in every setting. And I've also been asked to make presentations on this. And I have also known a few people who have written their dissertations or thesis on such topics, and it's been fascinating to people. Again, my name is Dr. Marcellina Ndidi, leading this discussion today on why do Africans do so well in diaspora. And there are so many parts to this. There is a series, actually. I will try to touch every point of that as we go into each different episodes. Like in every other aspect that I do, I don't know everything, and I am not going to base all my views or sharing or opinions on every aspect of Africa. I will try, depending on what the topic is. But to be fair to other countries, I really will like to always focus on my own country, Nigeria, and um, and then invite everybody else to try to do the same or dig deeper into what happens in their own countries within the continent. And if you're outside of the continent, you can also do that. So this is a creation of awareness that needs to be dealt deeper into. Now, this discussion that I'm going to start leading today is based or adapted from a book that I wrote a few years back. It's titled Raising an African Child in America. And I thought it was apt for me to add that it was from my perspective as an immigrant Nigerian mom, an African as well. Some people have argued it should have been a Nigerian immigrant mom or whichever way, but I prefer it to be an immigrant and a Nigerian mom from West Africa, Africa. Um, this book, I call it a piece of dry meat because as you chew, it gets bigger in your mouth. So it's a tiny little book that I wrote. But each chapter of the book can be a book by itself. So it's a chunk of just information and something to help people think about. Some people have asked me, okay, why did I write this? Um, when I decided to write that, I didn't start off to write a book or become an author as such. I was just watching little ones grow up. I started off to be one of those moms where I could have pursued, working around the clock and making all the money. But I wanted also, don't get me wrong, I did that as well a little bit, but I also wanted to focus on um, the young ones, raising them when I can and or when I could. But what I found out was that as I was doing that, other mothers were trusting me also um, during the weekend to bring their children to really play with mine. Um, no, I wasn't babysitting for money or anything. It was just the joy. And we would go to museums and to McDonald's, go to the library, anywhere, play outside. But one thing that was happening was, as I was, taking them around, three, four, or five them to six at a time, they will talk among themselves and I will listen to their conversation. I will have my little books or whatever it is that I am doing, on my own. I will sit a little bit, but keeping an eye on them, but watch and listen to them talk. And I sometimes I hear them, concerned about certain issues, talk about what is happening in their schools and all that. And I will ask questions. And this is how it all started for me to talk about the things that I heard from them. And as that, went on, it went on to the youth, to more. And they joke with me sometimes that I wrote a book on them. No, I didn't. But they started the interest of that. So this book that I am going to base these next discussions, and I think it will take parts 1, 2, 3, or 4. Um, it's where these thoughts are coming from. Now, this book is not about which upbringing style is the best, which environment is best for raising a kid. It could be here in diaspora or here at the homestead. It doesn't matter. Nor it's not a memoir of how um, hyphenated children were raised wherever, whether it's Britain or America or Canada or even in Timbuktu. This book is a discussion to share what challenges exist and what best practices some immigrant Nigerian moms or parents and other African parents have applied to raising a child in America. And in that case, you can apply that to Britain, Canada, or anywhere else, Iceland, as they balance values and culture. Some of the practices that we talk about have worked where others have failed. So there is no blueprint for really raising children anywhere in the world. But the values you think are important to you. This discussion actually, when I say it's being led from my own perspective, it's from the perspective of a foreign-born immigrant now living and raising, a child in America, for example, um, biological or otherwise, whether you adopted or you inherited from anybody else, raising children could be a task that many will find so many other ways that will work for them or not work for them. It means promoting and supporting the physical, emotional, social, and intellectual development of the said child from infancy to adulthood. So, raising of children is really as important as anything else in the world. So, when people ask the question, why do Africans do so well in diaspora? There is a whole lot going on about that. So, what we're going to do is examine some aspects. And this first part 1 is just to give you an overview, and we will deal deeply into that as we go on. Okay. So, again, let's look at the questions that come about. Who are these Africans we're talking about? Okay, so when we talk about diaspora, let's focus, for example, for those in diaspora, who are the Africans? First of all, remember that immigrants from Africa to, for example, the US, they didn't start as far back as people think. But let's talk about the ones that came in. Most of them settled heavily in urban areas such as Washington, D.C., Maryland, New York, Houston, Columbus, Ohio, Atlanta, Minneapolis, upon arrival in the US. And why is that? It's because these cities had the colleges that offered most of the earlier admissions to these immigrants. So often there are clusters of these immigrants, immigrant learners or students of African nationalities within these city areas huddled together. However, as they see the social and economic stability that comes from um, um, ethnic enclaves like Chinatowns, Germantown, Little Italy, the African immigrants have now begun to establish ethnic enclaves of their own at a much higher rate. So you see places like Little Ethiopia in Los Angeles, Little Senegal in New York City, and many more. Um, the longer African immigrants live in the U.S., we need to recognize that, the more likely they are to move to the suburbs or to the rural areas. Also important to note that African immigrants in the United States come from all regions in Africa and do not constitute just homogeneous groups. So as we have different tribes and different areas of Africa, we have as diverse situations as they come. They include people from different nationalities, linguistics, ethnic, racial, cultural, and special sort of social backgrounds. Remember, some of them we have Black Africans as well as we have white Africans. So all these make up the entity that came as Africans to the United States or to Canada or to Britain, to diaspora we're talking about. So having given you that general aspect, let's talk about the advent of um, um, the other groups. So when I talked about the advent of African immigrants to some parts of the outside world, we must remember, and I have, I decided to back this up with a quote. He who thinks he's leading and has no one following him is only taking a walk. So if you look back to the first Africans that came, they, like I stated, came to school and they settled in areas where they were given um, access to education where they're given admissions. Yeah. So these are the reasons why they came. So who were the first ones that gave us that lead? Okay. And we are all the ones walking behind them. They are people like Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, just to name a few. Um, they voluntarily came to America or to wherever they ended up in diaspora. They came to acquire knowledge. They did acquire the knowledge and hurried back to Africa to lead the battle for um, political independence. So we know the part Azikiwe played and the part Kwame Nkrumah played and the rest of them to restore, the countries from the hands of the colonial masters. So that was their main reason to leave the soil of Africa to come, which is different from the ones we also call, for example, in America, African Americans. Some came sold as slaves. So that is one area that we're not going to get into because it's a little bit controversial. When you hear some of our children say they are African Americans, well, they are not really African Americans in the sense of it, in the academic sense of it, in actually the social sense of it. But we're going to get there somehow. But I wanted to use this medium to shed a little light of who came when. So Then you come the African immigrants to America. Again, I talk about some steps that Maya Angelou, for example, talked about. Her quote, "For Africa to me is a glamorous act. It is a historical truth. No man can know where he is going unless he knows exactly where he has been and exactly how he arrived at this present place." So the reason I am trying to quote that is because we have generations of Africans, or for example, Nigerians here now in the United States of America. How did they get here? We have different sets of them. Um, First groups, second groups, third groups. I mentioned the first group that came, or maybe the second one, the likes of Dr. Nkrumah and Azikwe. They were the first that came. So then the next set after them came the second generation. Um, they had the goal of returning home as their predecessors to help in nation building, but were forced by history of economic security and other unforeseen circumstances in their respective countries. So they stayed back wherever they are, whether it's Britain, Canada, Finland, or anywhere else. This group became what are generally viewed as the first reluctant African immigrants. And again, I'm basing this in America, for example. After that group, the next group were drawn to America by the pull forces of attractiveness, what we call the New World. So, majority of these immigrants who came as students, this group finished their studies and then became residents. These are the parents of the children whose upbringing, rewards and challenges are being discussed in my book. Okay. Some of these parents, um, um, you know, uh, they had students came in with student visas, some with spousal visas, and then the population increased with the introduction of the lottery visa program. We know some people who came over with lottery. This latest visa program in is America's idea of encouraging immigration from various countries, including Africa, by a kind of quota system. So after that group, um, again, remember that every group that came, especially the first and the second group, including, I think, the third as well, came with the sole purpose of advancing themselves, everybody else. But then their plan was to complete these advancements and then return to their respective countries. But certain circumstances led many of these African immigrants, Nigerian immigrants, to become more interested in gaining permanent residence in North America, for example, and other continents of the world. Um, One of those is education and the knowledge acquisition, which we are going to dig deeper into. So today's African immigrants are the descendants of the second and third group of immigrants described before. They are the parents of most African children born or brought to the America, for example. So we focus on these children, or how these children, especially the ones born of Nigerian immigrants, are being raised. Okay, so this is our journey. The modern Nigerian immigrant, which is telling us that, again, the quote, an African quote, however long the night, the dawn will break. That means what? That those of them that are now coming in whatever the group is, fourth, fifth, sixth generation of all that, they are still coming in because of um, knowledge acquisition, education, but most of them are staying back because of um, uh, uh, what to do when they get back. They no longer fit in. Okay? But the question that always goes through the minds of whether, the new immigrants that came in, the African immigrants, especially to Americas, or the modern one as we speak, they always have the same question in mind. The question is always how much to embrace the environment they have come to call home. The ones that came, the fourth, fifth group that came now, who can no longer go back or who decide not to go back, they are now trying to find a way. Remember, those who came first didn't care about the environment. They just got the acquisition of knowledge and they went back. The second, the third. Now the third group who are now deciding to stay after the acquisition are the ones that are asking the questions, how much to embrace of the environment. As adults that came before they start having their children, they came to acquire the good values to complement the ones they already have and ignore those that they are not comfortable with. Those are, I will call that, the ones that are now being called the semi-modern group. On the other hand, they're also asking the question, how do they know the values they brought with them are good for the American society, which now they call home? If they must stay with the values they were raised on, that they are bringing from wherever they came from in Africa, how do these values make other non-Nigerians or non-Africans around them feel? Okay. Um, these are still the biggest challenges that are faced by numerous Nigerians and the African immigrants. The fear or challenge goes beyond even that. Confronted with such challenges and confusion as to which cultural values or customs to adopt and adapt to in other people's country, a host country like America, it's something else to grapple with. Which values or customs do they now raise the children they are bringing up here in America? Oh, the ones they brought in or the one they bore here. These children who eventually will choose to be Nigerians, Americans, or both, hyphenated now we call Nigerian Americans, or British Americans if it was in Britain. Um, British, Nigerian British or British Nigeria, I don't know how they call that. Um, Canadian Nigerians or Nigerian Canadians, which one, whichever way you placed those, country names before or after. The question is, how do we now, those of us that are called modern Nigerian immigrants or the third, fourth generation that came, how do we help make the children make the right choices? Or how are we doing that currently? How does one raise a child to do well in a country that is far away from theirs with the values we know, as against also the values that these children we are bringing up in a different environment already are born into? How do we help them make right decisions? Okay. So these are the questions that people are asking us, how are we doing it? And with such whole of sorts of variables going on, how come we are doing so well? So then that brings us to the emerging generation of immigrants, our children, the ones now that are beginning to bear their own children. Okay. So This is an example. Myself, Dr. Marcellina and Ndidi M.OPARAOJI, coming in as a third or fourth generation in America, now grappled with the customs or values I came with. I came here as an adult. But then my own children that were born here, or some siblings that I brought in here, are now beginning to have their own children, for example. And if that is the case, how are they going to also raise their own children to be as successful as those of us who the world is saying as being successful? What did we do? That's the question that the world is asking. So for the emerging generation, we are being told that children, and this is a quote by Joy Bell, that children must be made of silk. They must be brought up with serenity, in their skin, but bulletproof strength in their souls. This is the new breed of children, ones that are soft to touch, but are truly unbreakable. Unbreakable in a beautiful way, not in a lost way. When I read this quote, I think they are talking about the children of African immigrants, because that's how we're trying to treat them. But some people look at them as soft. They are not. And I like the second quote, because this is now what our children are telling us, that I keep trying to share with their parents who want to listen. And that's the basic basis of this book that I wrote. They are telling us, you can't make me be nice. You can't make me be good. You can't make me believe, but your example, your kindness, your patience and love will affect me, perhaps enough that eventually I may choose to do those things. Rochelle Goodrich said this. And this is exactly what I am basing on this last bullet, where we are. These are the reasons why we are excelling. The generation before this emerging one, they were doing well because they were combining values they brought with the values they met. In some cases, they were achieving because they were listening and hearing their parents' voices in their ears. Now that that group is also having children who are now having children, are we going to still maintain that? I don't know. But we are answering the question, why are we doing as well as we are doing? So these are the comments that are coming in, um, especially on the Nigerian immigrants that we are hearing, and people also are hearing, and they are asking, how did you do this? So according to uh, migrationpolicy.org, there are said to be about 376 plus or minus thousand Nigerian immigrants living in the US. And despite the challenges with regards to race and inequality and all this stuff in between, in the US, for example, it happens in Britain, it happens, I mean, in the UK, in Europe, in Asia, where you have Nigerians who are immigrants. Nigerian immigrants remain the most successful African immigrants in the country. So you ask yourself why this is being said of us in the US. This is where my focus is on. Nigerian scholars are known for their strong academic backgrounds and commitment to advanced education. This is what they have all been doing all along, from the first group to second group to third generation also, and now, with over 55% pursuing graduate level studies in the United States alone. And there have been cases where a whole department is made of Nigerians. There was this social media clippings of a particular law department where there were all graduates, Nigerians that graduated from that academic session. So you go figure. It's happening every day. It's in the news. It's in social media. It's everywhere. And these are really not hearsays, they are real. According to a statement from the U.S. Embassy and Consulate in Nigeria, Nigerian students bring a wealth of diversity, perspectives, and academic excellence to U.S. universities, enriching the educational experience for all students. We see some of them now bringing also their own culture into the classroom. Um, some of us have a lot of stories to we can share of when we came into the classrooms in the U.S. Um, you from before you come in, you think this is a different world, but this is where the confidence of the Nigerian comes in, that you think you got what it takes. So I remember someone who came from College of Education, and coming in to find that, whoops, every subject or every course they presented, they've already done, maybe rotely or without textbooks, but there's nothing for them to do to get their first degrees but to enroll in master's degree classes. Because for whatever reason, in those days, the Nigerian education system had given them a good background. I can say of that today. The other aspect people say is that the United States has announced, for example, the United States announced that Nigerian students enrolled at colleges and universities rose from 2,029 in 2023-24 session academic year at a 13.5% increase from the previous year. So, according to 2024 Open Doors report on international education exchange, the number places Nigeria as Africa's leading source of international students and seventh globally. This is by Adedapo Adesanya. But when you dig deeper also, you find that a whole lot of the progress of the higher, even when you go down to the high schools and to the elementary schools, in almost every city you go into, Nigerians are excelling in the classroom. And also, if you dig deeper, they are being placed highly in companies, for example, in the US and everywhere else. And they are heading some of these places as well as academic arena. So let's give it to them. So some have asked the question, how do immigrant African parents, these Nigerians, for example, raise their children to succeed and achieve? What is it that you do? It's just like you will go to any place and you see the Asians. You are asking the same question. How are they raised that they are so smart? The Indians, um, they are of the same humanity, but for whatever reason, these groups are excelling. And Nigeria as a country is really representing Africa very well when it comes to the outside world. So we're going to look at each of these areas to share deeply how and why these Nigerian children are really raising the roof. Character building, we'll talk about that in episode 15. Um, Again, we talk about this um, increase in awareness of what to do and not what not to do, um, helps these children focus by reminding them that trouble is not infectious, it is contracted. That's an interesting one, and we'll talk about that when we talk about it. That adage that says it takes a village to raise a child. This is where it comes into play. Episode 16. Stay tuned for that. In episode 17, we talk about what it means to get a good education. Is it just hard work or is it something else? We'll examine that in episode 17. Um, some think it's by infusing our ancestral cultural influence where it's applicable, is what is making us excel. whether it's emphasis on family, extended family, what it is about marriage, food, attire, everything, mannerisms in raising the child that is making this child do so well. Episode 18 will talk about that. So, or is it that in the news today, when you look very well, it is, I'm not saying it's hot, it's not happening. I mean, in a community like that, there are bound to be one or two of our children that, go astray. But majority of them, it's hard for you to hear in the news that this Nigerian child is being killed or they committed this or that compared to their numbers and in pari passu with their achievement. You will see that a lot of them are not getting into that troubled aspect. Why? Um, because again, some people have shared that Nigerian parents um, start early to talk to their children about the adversity of the environment, the racism, the discrimination, and all. What else do they say to them? We are going to examine in episode 19. And we'll round episode 20 off by talking about the environmental adaptation of all these children, the tenacity, what makes them still hold on, and what makes them thick. So these are going to be covered in details. We're going to close this session today by showing this summary with a photo speak. This is the book. When I designed the cover of this book, of my book, I gave some thought to it. I wanted to be that again, following the thought of our those who came first, second, or third, why they came. They came for a brighter world. That's the sun. I used America because that's where I am based, and that's where the basic of this talk was all about, or the book. It's those children in America, raising them in America. And I thought about children who are free, and as they grow up, they are free also in their thinking, in their innovation, in their sending forth to the world, including back to their ancestors, what they bring about the knowledge acquisition and all that. So, and again, paying reverence to the land that accepted all this group or groups from Africa coming in, the United States, for example. And that's what you see there. Personally, I came to the shores of America from Nigeria, West Africa, a few years ago as a young adult, freshly married to my West African spouse. All we knew was what we learned from our parents and our community growing up, except for what we read in books about the outside world. We had no idea what lay ahead about surviving in another environment outside our third world. We were eager to achieve and had been sent forth to study some more, but in an environment different from what we were used to in so many ways. We had a choice to succeed or fail. Many immigrants like us strive hard to make success of such opportunity, but not having many examples to lean on, but to pull from our homestead upbringing experiences. Our parents' voices constantly ringing and echoing in our ears. The same baton we try to relay to our now hyphenated children being raised in diaspora. And this is why the question always comes up. Are we going to continue the same way to achieve what we have, the world is seeing us as achieving? If so, is it possible to be holding on to values that sometimes don't coincide with the environment these children now then find themselves? Are we going to still be succeeding or being looked upon as one of the best when we are having the next generation now faced with different cultures and different values all around them? So this is where we stop today. And this is where I also call on everybody to think deeply about this as we go. How do we make things better for our children? How do we hold on to this reputation that we already have cultivated? Why Africans do so well in diaspora, especially the Nigerians. I thank you for listening. Again, subscribe to my channel, my YouTube channel. You can send stars as well. And we continue this discussion in part 2, where we'll start talking about the particular items that make us shine as Nigerians in diaspora. What is it that others can learn? Because one of the things I found out is that some of these variables can also work anywhere else in the world, including at the homestead. So thank you. Again, keep working hard, keep doing what you're doing, and I'll see you in the next episode. This is your host or hostess, like some people call Dr. Marcellina M.OPARAOJI. Bye-bye.